Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Block Party debrief where the Seattle Design Festival interviews our installation designers from our annual Block Party. I am Trevor Dykstra, one of the coordinators, along here with Christine. And this week we're going to be talking to two folks from LMN, including our other co-host, Tyler. Hi, Tyler.
Hey.
And Hank.
Hey.
Howdy, everybody. We could do this a little different than usual, where we kind of intro the thing. I guess we should when we're doing this ask or tell people, who the designer or who the firm is. So LMN, maybe we should say LMN's an architecture firm. One of you might want to give a little brief on that, and then we can dive into what you did.
Yeah, I could start us off. For those who don't know who LMN is, we have architectural designers, we have interior designers, we have urban designers in house, and we do a whole mix of different typologies, around the states and also around the world. I'm Tyler Schaffer, and I've been with the company for about 15, 16 years or so. Primarily working on transportation projects. And Hank, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Hank. I've been with LMN Architects now for, I think, about 7 years. And for the last handful of years, I've been the shop manager from the space as we've grown from kind of a small shop in the basement to our new space now, which is about 6,000 square feet. That's allowing us to kind of take on some larger projects like the installation we did for Seattle Design Festival last year.
Yeah. Well, we should talk about that piece.
That's why we're here.
I'm going to pull it up on stream here. Tell us about it. This was called Equipoise.
Yeah, and Hank, maybe I'll start us off, and you can get into the details about fabrication and whatnot. So we started the design of the installation for the block party. Thinking of it as really the competition. We started. This is sort of the some of the things we'll cover today. You can go on to the next slide. So there, last year there was a pavilion competition that preceded the block party call for proposals, and we submitted an entry. We didn't get selected. And we said, well, you know what, we're going to build it anyway, and decided to make it the block party installation. So we sort of started a little bit earlier than I think we typically do in terms of the schedule, which I think helped quite a bit, because by the time we were done with the proposal for the competition, we had a really well thought out design and a plan for building it, so it made the process a little less hectic, I think. I mean, we were still building all the way up until I think the day before the installation, but
it was not less hectic.
Well, it was a little bit more ambitious, I think, our installation last year than we typically do, and we've been participating in the festival for, I think, since its inception.
Yeah, certainly since the inception of Block Party, there's been someone from LMN involved in some way.
So that's kind of where we started. You want to go on the next one? Yeah, and these are just some early sketches of, again, thinking of it more of a pavilion than the block party installation. So we were reacting to this sort of temporary, ephemeral structure, and how to design something that was quickly deployable, that can break down into smaller pieces and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what we started with the thought process.
Yeah, more universal than just the connection theme.
That's right.
Yeah, given you were submitting for this pavilion program, that's going to be for a pavilion that lasts for several years.
Right, and that had to be demountable and that could be easily reinstalled in other locations. So we came up with this idea of doing a hyperbolic paraboloid, and in this we did a couple these scale mock-ups of like how that structure could work. This was an idea where each one of those blue little flags is taped. It's a pin joint, and this thing could completely collapse. So we thought of building a structure that you could just bring out to the site and just unfold and put it and hoist into place. But you could see that our little
Oh,
It's your cue to take over, Hank, as Tyler works through his
he'll hop back in
internet
here, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So this was a pretty early study. You know, we'd only been working on kind of this concept for a few weeks by the time we reached this point, and we're trying to basically navigate the balance of being like open-minded and creative, but also rather practical, because if we move ahead, we actually have to build the thing, and you know, not just hand it off to someone to build, but we have to build it ourselves.
Yes.
So that puts an
Yeah.
extra kind of level of constraint on us. But we saw a lot of potential in this form, even though we didn't yet really understand how it was going to break down. We thought that it seemed like there were kind of a number of frame elements that we could kind of reduce it down to, and then maybe some tensile structure in the middle. We had already been talking a lot about how kind of the ideal typology for this pavilion was going to be something like a tent, something that had kind of a lightweight frame with a canopy that we could stretch over it, because of the desire to be able to break it down into something that could be transported by a vehicle. I think the original goal was like to fit in a van, but we realized quickly we're going to have to exceed that, maybe to a truck.
A little bit bigger than that. Yeah. That's true. I mean, yeah, there were different scale implications when designing for the pavilion than most folks have when they're designing for installation freeform. Yeah. So everything got to be big to start with, and then of course everybody always has big ideas, so you're just going from there.
And so we had, like, I think during our initial discussions, we were thinking about how we could meet all of the requests that the design festival had for the pavilion, and we realized that if we tried to meet all of them, we were going to feel really limited in our approach.
Yeah.
So we decided let's just put together a proposal that we thought we would be happy with, and it was something that was going to take maybe longer to assemble and take up a little bit more space than the design festival had said. Like, these are our wishes.
Yeah.
But I think we wanted to put our effort into something that we felt was going to be kind of, you know, more iconic and grand than if we tried to meet everything. And so
try to simplify.
Yeah. So sometimes it's, you have to, they weren't rules that we broke, but sometimes you have to kind of step outside of meeting every request so that you can bring something, you know, kind of grand and iconic. So, hey, Tyler, I'm just riffing.
Sorry. My computer crashed there. Go ahead.
But yeah, at this point, we had pretty much figured out that this is the form we wanted to go with. And so we spent a week or two trying to understand what is the approach to assembling this. Like, these aren't construction documents, but how do we think it goes together? We were lucky at this point to be working with a handful of engineers who we've collaborated with professionally before, CPL, who is also located in the same building as us. And they were able to give us some kind of rough guidelines. We would say, like, hey, can we do like a tube frame, a metal tube frame for this? And, you know, say the arms are 20 feet long. Like, yeah, that's possible. You probably want it to be like about 5 inches in diameter, and, you know, your feet need to be this large. And that was enough for this kind of early study to know, like, yeah, we're in the right zone. We don't need to solve it yet, because at this point we don't know if we're building it. But this is basically the point we brought it to for submission. We wanted to understand it well enough that we knew it was possible, even if we haven't solved all the details yet. We didn't want to put ourselves in a position where it's like, oh, geez, we have no idea. So we even had at this point a nice spreadsheet going with a rough breakdown of, okay, we probably need 8 pieces of aluminum that are this size, and we need this much steel plate and this many channels. Throw in, you know, a few $100s for hardware, this for the cloth. We wanted to have an idea of roughly what we were going to be into. And I think we understood at that point that even if we won, we were going to exceed the stipend that was being provided. But we felt strongly enough about this approach that we were going to kind of move ahead with it. And so we hadn't solved the details, but we had a solid understanding of kind of the amount of material it was going to take, the type of assembling it had to be. And we knew roughly what we were going to be capable of in-house and what we were going to have to get help from outside. So I think at this point we felt confident that we could build it, even though we didn't know exactly what it was yet. Yeah. So this was, I think, a great place to be for submission. And because we also had a couple of other ideas of what we wanted to use it for that summer, our timeline was actually a little accelerated relative to the SDF timeline. And I think we decided to build this even before we heard back that we hadn't actually been accepted.
Yeah.
Just because we had by that point determined, you know what, this is a thing we want to do regardless of the outcome of the kind of competition. So yeah, I think that kind of takes us through our initial kind of design and proposal phase. Let's see what else we got here. Okay. So this is a completely new drawing. We went kind of back to scratch and started to try and answer some of the questions about how assembly and detailing works. One of the things we were really concerned about was how to erect these kind of large metal pieces without the use of heavy equipment. We knew it would probably take at least semi-skilled workers to assemble this. So we weren't going to meet the requirements of just lay workers, unskilled workers assembling it. But we wanted to make sure that heavy equipment wasn't required. And we wanted to make sure that it was going to be able to assemble safely. So there was no risk of like a heavy piece coming down on someone. So what we ended up doing was designing kind of a joinery, this central hub that does kind of almost all of the work of the system, that allows these pieces to all be assembled flat on the ground and then pivot up into place with the use of kind of a custom built hoist we use, so that at no point is there someone kind of underneath a heavy load that could potentially come back down. You're able to kind of have people out of the way and have it lifted using mechanical advantage. And this hoist was something that was basically a couple of aluminum tubes and a winch and some cable and some hooks. So like something that we were able to, again, build in-house that just let us build this kind of safely. You can also see here that we have a strategy going now for how this is anchored. Because we're imagining it as a temporary structure, we're not anchoring into the ground the way a traditional structure might if you were to build this as a permanent installation, say. So instead of a big concrete anchor in the ground, we needed to kind of have a ballast above ground, because we weren't sure, is this going to be installed on pavement or is it going to be installed on grass? So we went with a system that didn't require going into the ground. We basically just have concrete CMU blocks, an off-the-shelf product that is very dense and very heavy. So it doesn't take up a lot of space, but it brings a lot of mass. And again, this is a point where we're working with the engineers and they tell us, okay, if you're willing to make the legs this long, say 5 feet long, then this is the amount of weight that we have to have on it to feel comfortable with not only it kind of staying upright in ideal conditions, but also staying upright after some wind. I think this is rated for like 40 miles an hour as it is. And then also with the idea that a full-sized human might at some point try to climb it. So if someone up to say 200 pounds were to try to climb out to the tip, this would be perfectly sturdy. So yeah, this is us just kind of taking that idealized form and breaking it into kind of bite-sized pieces. You can see almost all of those flat pieces, that are in the middle there are laser cut, actually. So we were able to draw them and take them straight from our drawing software and have a shop cut those perfectly to size for us. I think if we scroll ahead, maybe a slide. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's our pile of metal. I think hopefully in one of the next slides here.
It was all what, quarter 3/8 inch aluminum?
I think it was 3/8 wall, 6-inch diameter. We ended up, after our initial round of engineering, we went back and said, you know what, really we'd like another couple feet of length on this. So they kind of upsized some of our requirements, but it actually made the head height kind of much more comfortable inside. But you can see here, we've built a jig. So this jig holds all of the pieces in the correct position in 3D space, because the kind of assembly of this requires things to align relatively precisely. And so rather than hand this off to a welder and say like, hey, could you figure out how to hold these in just the right position and stick them together, we showed up with this jig. This is, again, something we were able to draw right in the file and then cut it out on our CNC machine and deliver it as this little platform with these basically, whatever you want to call them, little jigs that hold everything in the perfect position so that all they have to do is kind of set the plates in place and weld. And they were kind enough to kind of mark and label each piece so that we know which one it, say which hub it mated with. And so that actually gives you a little bit more forgiveness in your tolerance. It matters less that it's exactly the perfect size. It mattered more that it matched perfectly with the piece next to it. And with everything being welded in the kind of assembled position, even though they're not all being welded to each other, we know that they fit because they're welded in the correct location. So this was a huge help. The welders told us like this would have been almost impossible for them to do without us providing this jig. They never would have gotten it in just the right spot.
No, you do something with a lot more
trying to place it. So a lot of these skills, I think, are things we actually picked up from kind of working at architectural model scale, you know, using little laser cut parts to kind of hold our models in the right spot until everything's finished gluing. So we're trying to use kind of our digital fabrication expertise to our advantage to make assembly more straightforward. So yeah, just playing to our strengths, using our digital design tools, digital fabrication tools to make sure that this kind of comes together correctly. So let's see if we can scan ahead. These are a couple shots that the welder took for us, and you can see that they've kind of just basically run a bead wherever two pieces came together. Pretty simple for them. That is, I think that's only the first half of the legs assembled. Basically, this is this is half the height of the full piece because it doesn't yet have the kind of inner sleeve that extends it. So we wanted to save as much as we could on labor costs. So as soon as they were done welding, we took it back to our space. So this is our new shop, pre-renovation. So we're in the space, but we haven't like turned it into a shop yet. It's just
a big space though.
Room to play.
Yeah. Frankly, I don't think we would have been able to fabricate this without that space. I mean, we needed all of it.
And that's even something that's like wouldn't necessarily be possible with a construction partner because you're using such a huge amount of floor area. Probably, I assume it's not like you're putting it away at night. You know, it's probably sitting out like this. Yeah.
That's something that you really have to have a good idea about before you commit where it's going to be built.
Yes.
Because unless you can build it modularly and be confident that it's going to come all together on site, you kind of need enough room to set up the whole thing. And if that doesn't exist in your office, it might be someone's garage that's willing to sacrifice the space for a number of weeks, or it might be a construction partner who has a yard to assemble in.
Thinking through all that is like part of the design challenge of this event. You know, it's like, okay, you know, like, especially for the architects, it's like, well, we're used to drawing it and it just, you know, it goes away and somehow means and methods are over there, you know, and it's like, now when you have to think about it, you really do have to, you can back yourself into a corner, even if it's like, hey, I know how to build this and I can build this, but then, okay, but where and how, and like, you know, with my group, it's, you got to tear it down every time. And it's got to all compact, really small and go into the store, you know, like it's definitely part of the, you know, pulling it off is definitely a successful design. Just being able to get it built, you know.
Yeah.
Did you ever document like how long it took for each one of those phases and just like how many different iterations you had to go through?
I think the best, like the documentation was basically our calendar. It's tough to say exactly how many hours we spent per session, but we had Tyler was a great project manager for this whole experience. He had us lay out what we thought the major steps were, and we kind of broke those into chunks. Like, by this point we should be here, by this point we should be here, and then as we'd get close, we'd have weekly meetings where we would go over what needs to happen in the next week so that we're ready for the next step. I would say one of our biggest weaknesses last year.
I was just going to say real quick, I will say that and I think Hank and I, we've talked about this as having champions for different parts of the project, right? Because there were so many different components. Having, somebody in charge of one aspect of it, like the canopy, like the electrical, that really helped break down a complex build into more manageable parts.
Because we had I think 4 or 5 major components to this. So you have the steel, or the metal structure, the steel and aluminum. You have the canopy. You have the electrical lights, and you have the wooden benches that kind of cover the legs.
Yeah.
And we were able to at least break that into kind of 3 teams, 4 kind of, but yeah, metal, canopy, lights, and the benches. And we had different leaders, I think, for each of those groups that were able to kind of keep pushing those things forward. We had to stay coordinated between us, but I would say though that one of the things that we struggled with last year was we didn't have kind of a set schedule. We tried to be flexible to the people who wanted to participate, and we said like, oh, we'll figure it out as we go, and that ended up putting I think a lot of the work on just a few people, because other people would say like, oh, that doesn't work for me. Oh, sorry, or they lose interest. So part of our approach this year is to kind of establish from the beginning, here's a kind of a calendar and what the expectations are for participation.
And the balance of that is tough, like, I mean, like when I've done it, we try to, I'll just go, okay, this is the date, it's got to be there, right? Okay, then we're going to go back from that, and it's like, by this date, we need to be this, and you kind of just create a regular schedule. But even when you create a regular schedule, then you're creating a situation where people get burnt out because it's just every, week. But you got to keep a clip where it's like, we got to hit these milestones.
We're actually
such a balance between that and like losing everyone or a significant portion where you're all of a sudden the key stakeholders are the ones doing all of the work, not just sort of some of it.
and so this year, the way we're trying to break it down, I guess there are 3 chunks. There's the kind of before submission phase. There's the kind of design and planning phase, and then there's the construction phase. And so we're having our first planning meeting, I think, next week already, even though the call has not gone out yet.
We know
we're going to submit. So like, let's start talking about it. Especially because our office, we would like to do this in a way that is very kind of inclusive. Whoever wants to participate can throw out ideas. And so if you don't have like a person telling you this is the direction we're going, you need a little bit more time to kind of sort out what is the direction going to be. So we're going to be meeting every week, I think, up until the submission is required. After that, we'll back off a bit. We'll try and meet every other week for a couple of hours to kind of make sure the idea is continuing to move forward. But I think we're going to spend the 4 to 6 weeks leading up to the installation here every week for a number of hours. And then probably some weekend days as we realize we're behind, to make sure it all comes together. And that, that'd be different for every team depending on how intense your submission is. But I think we're very interested in kind of architectural scale objects. And so that means a pretty large commitment.
Yeah.
The other thing I think we're interested is doing a lot of this work ourselves, where we're not necessarily hiring it out or getting a contractor on the team, because I think we find that it's a lot of fun to use power tools and to fabricate it yourself, but everyone learns a lot, and when they're working out
I think it's invaluable to do it yourself, like the learning by doing at this scale. I mean, this is how I was trained early on at like a design build various offices like that. That was a big part of it. Is like, you could draw anything, but then building it, you learn a lot about how you're conveying information, but also just sort of other ways in which things can come together, or the way, like it allows you to kind of be more creative about some things that we aren't necessarily, thinking of,
So,
traditional design.
I think the slides we're looking at are actually a great example. Could we go back just one slide?
Yeah, to the initial canopy there.
So the canopy was a really interesting challenge. We thought briefly about trying to connect with a company that does like tensile structures, but we realized it was going to be kind of a significant ask for. It's a lot of work but not enough to like be worth someone's time necessarily.
Mhm.
And so we tried to figure out, can we break this down ourselves? And so we took our ideal form that was drawn in Rhino and we split it
Mhm.
into sections and used like the unroll command to create these two-dimensional pieces that when sewn together will create our kind of complex ruled surface. And if you scroll ahead here,
Mhm.
this is like one of my favorite kind of creative moments in the project. We got a projector that has a very short throw, which means it can make a very large image from a short
Oh yeah, I
distance.
see it up here in the left
And we
hand
mounted
corner.
it to the column and we dialed it in so that we were projecting our templates at life size directly onto the fabric. So we didn't have to go wasting like a bunch of plotter paper to get these kind of perfectly
Yeah.
sized pieces.
And then
And we
it's
ended
not
up,
right anyway because it's somebody
oh, and tracing would be kind of a nightmare. So
Yeah.
now we had hot knives. Our material, it was made out of a plastic, so you're able to use a hot knife
Mhm.
to just cut it literally from the line that's being projected onto it.
Mhm.
So saved a ton of time, made it actually go together pretty seamlessly. You can see there on the projection, there's actually multiple sets of lines within the panel, and those are going to be where we put the sleeves that will hold the LEDs eventually. So,
Okay, so you're cutting and you were also marking for your stitching then as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
but this is, I think, an example of if we handed this off to someone else, they would probably do it the old-fashioned way, unless they had like an awesome, like
Yeah.
giant cutting machine, CNC.
Yeah. Yeah, there are shape cutters for this. So if you went to like a ship, I can tell. So again, we do all these big
Someone who makes
inflatables,
sail.
right? We like we're jealous of all the ship folks who have big shape cutters for that.
Yep.
And then we're doing like you're saying, we're like I will for huge things we'll use projection like this and then also tape, and you're kind of just hoping for and you're living with deformation.
Yep.
Or you're doing the plotter prints at sort of certain scales and then just really hoping nobody borks it, and of course somewhere along the line the paper shifts, or people don't cut paper very smooth, if it's cut you're introducing human error along the way as you do that. Like sure, it prints out from a computer, but then you got to cut. Well, that's a human who's not going to be quite right, and then someone's going to trace it, and of course that's going to end up some percentage bigger or smaller, and so there's some human error, and then they're going to cut the fabric, and then that's the third, like versus at least just straight to it. It's like, well, you have them cutting the fabric, so there's a slight variation there, but you're at least
But it's kind of a great chance to be a bit experimental because it's not a client project. If things go a little bit in an unexpected way, that's okay. It's just a great chance to kind of do something different and try to push the boundaries of your skill set.
Yeah.
Oh, we picked up, this was one of the few tools that we had to buy for the project. We got a serger, which is a brilliant tool because it sews the material together and overlocks the edge, so it kind of prevents it from fraying and cuts off your excess all in one fell swoop. Even then, it was a kind of a laborious project. Without this tool, I don't know that we could have done the sail or the canopy ourselves.
Yeah, Andrea in her office, she sewed 1,000 linear feet.
Yep.
That's what she did.
And we would have had to do that we'd have to go back and forth multiple times if we hadn't used this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's worth doing your research and trying to figure out what is the right tool for the job.
True.
It will.
if it's attainable, right? Yeah, exactly. You're not.
Yep, and it's a balance figuring out what can you do yourself, what do you have to send out. But I think we were really fortunate with this because we have a couple tools at our disposal, like a table saw and a CNC machine. We were able to couple a lot of anything that required the digital fabrication kind of ourselves, and then the few pieces that were outside of our capability. There are great resources out there. Oh yeah, here's a great shot. For the first few panels, you can sew just one to the next. But as it gets larger, you have this big bulky object. And so for the final seam, you're carrying the entire canopy through one sewing machine. So it was kind of an all hands on deck situation.
This is what my house looks like at like midnight when I'm sewing a big inflatable.
Yeah.
And you're just hoping I think this bundled up pile over here is one part, and I think this, and then you get to the end and you double checking to make sure you didn't flip it. Yeah. But this is definitely the other thing people will do with these big sales is they'll build a big table all the way around that serger, and then you can kind of easily slide the sheet around. But then that means you're making this huge surface.
Yeah.
I think we ran out of tables. We
Yes.
used everyone we had.
But we're just using banquet tables, we're
Well,
keeping it simple.
And Johnston had a similar for their pavilion where they did it, and they actually were able to do it. I think they found somewhere where they're doing it with the sail setup, where somebody got them a floor where you actually sit down in the floor, and the machine is sitting level with the floor, and then you just kind of slide the seat. So they got lucky, somebody. But like, yeah, this is about as close as you can get to it here and then making use of many hands. I'd say that goes into advice column for folks is, what we can't make up in terms of manufacturing, either capability or skill or whatever. It's like most of these teams, if you can find extra people, you can use the extra folks as kind of what's the word? Not a magic wand, but a way to kind of boost your performance as well. Yeah.
And I think there's always a number of people who are express interest in being part of the making. And so it's worth thinking about what are the opportunities to bring in somebody who doesn't know the project well or isn't necessarily skilled, that we can just use kind of their strength, their just presence to kind of help cover a lot of ground, because there's always a couple tasks that you just need a ton of people on, or that would benefit from having a ton of people on it. And
that's nice to like sometimes, it's like, look, sometimes you gotta be just comfortable holding the other end of the tape. It's not all it's helpful all around.
Yep.
So, some more sewing here.
Yep. There we're starting to feed in our LED light strips.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were lucky to have on our team Chris Savage, who knows his way around electronics and was able to kind of set up a system for us that allowed us to have however many thousand LEDs were in there. So I think it's 20 strips that are each about 20 feet long, and they're all individually addressable. So we can kind of control each LED individually. And so he went kind of solo. He worked solo for a good stretch of this, but he was going kind of as soon as we had determined that we were making it, he started off on his own, planning ahead. He built a couple of custom circuit boards for this project to help kind of basically distribute the data to all of the strips. I understand so little about this system because he was just kind of the wizard behind it all.
That amount of LED, you also need, you've got various power adapter, like there's a lot going on.
Yep. So we tried to have just enough collaboration to know that we're going to have a place to route the wiring, and we're going to have a place to house your electronic boxes. But beyond that, we just kind of gave him free reign over there. We figured out how much room he needed for us to pull these things through. There was a bit of troubleshooting figuring out how to actually install the LEDs, but we ended up just kind of zip tying them to some nylon strapping and pulling the strapping all the way through the sleeve.
And then they're living in the fabric then permanently, basically. They're not inserted in each installation.
It's so challenging. Yeah, we just left them in and folded it very carefully.
And it's all right. You're not worried. Yeah, that's my question.
I think one of the weaknesses of this pavilion, as a kind of, if it were being set up for a long-term installation, is the electrical connections. We weren't really able to. We didn't have time to work out a way to really make them secure enough to last long-term without kind of somebody keeping an eye on them. So right now they're good for a couple of days, but after that point, there's risk of kind of connections being wiggled loose depending on how the wind's flapping around. So I think everything else we could pretty much set up and leave it for a few weeks, no problem. But these guys you need someone kind of keeping track of them. So for something like the design festival, I think we kind of landed in the sweet spot. Let's see what else we got in here.
Some more photos of that. There it is on the nylon, on the webbing.
Yeah. Yep. And all his little boards kind of packed in there. He had some interesting challenges. He had designed them around readily accessible chips. And then as he went to order, those chips were out of stock. You can remember there were just chip shortages everywhere. And he had to kind of panic, do a redesign at the last minute. But
no more Pixel Blaze. So he made his own custom then at that point, basically. Wow.
Yeah,
it's so much easier with the off-the-shelf ones. I mean, you're still doing a lot of the work regardless. You're still starting it all together. But yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah. So like if you wanted to let them go random, you could probably just do Amazon
Yeah.
stuff. But trying to coordinate
Mhm.
all of these, I think, was a pretty significant effort. Look at all this weird stuff he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad he was on our team. Any of us could have figured it out.
Well, that's another good point, right? Is like if you're assembling a team, you know, having multiple folks with different strengths is useful, you know, to help kind of broaden the idea. Yeah, more circuits.
So yep, that was kind of the first time we erected it
Getting them in
our
there.
space.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're lucky to have ceilings over 20 feet in here, but this is 18 feet tall, so we're within a couple feet of the ceiling.
Yeah.
Setting this up in there. Let's see if we can just scroll through quickly the last.
Yeah, we got another 10 sheets here. So now we're into the base.
Yep.
Which I was going to point out here, something that came up earlier when we were talking about the ballast. Is the other smart thing that I think we really appreciated here was the ballast is one thing, but if you're stacking objects, of course, the issue is, well, what happens if those knock over? You no longer have the ballast. And this solves that issue really elegantly by like, okay, there's a cage, you know, so that they can't go anywhere. You know, those CMU blocks, no one's going to knock it over,
So,
you know. Or
I'll point out something from that first image, actually, that you were just on.
This one right here?
It's a little difficult to see, but you can see we already have this intention of kind of matching the angle of the frame with that bench and pulling back, having a little bit of a reveal there. Like part of the goal of this was to make it feel a bit kind of magical. We wanted to seem a little bit confusing that it was standing upright on its own. And this move was kind of successful, I think, in achieving that. We had so many people who are like in the field, like architecture engineers, who are like, how did you anchor this thing?
Yeah, it feels like too short in your head, you know, like the optics of it look, you know, things are foreshortened, and then also the way it's splayed, you're not reading it as two legs, and your brain says, oh, that's not long enough to brace that huge.
So and that's the kind of fun part of approaching this from an architect's perspective is like not losing sight of kind of that intention and taking the easy way out and, you know, making a big brace that is, oh, obviously that's how it's standing up. So we ended up leaning heavily on our coworker Alex Woodhouse, who is a grasshopper guru, and him and Chris Lim kind of tag teamed the design of this. Chris did a lot of the initial kind of design, and Alex helped design or helped sort out kind of the logic for how it was going to be sliced up. And we basically were able to come up with a system where there were kind of dowel holes that indexed everything in place. It's, you know, it's a really fluid form, and if they don't line up just precisely, it's going to look kind of chunky. And so we were able, again, kind of lean on our kind of the modeling techniques we've learned from just architectural modeling, and like, let's use the tools to kind of create how do we call it, like indexing locations so that it's impossible to put it together the wrong way. You know, if you put one piece after the next, it has to come together correctly. Now, that's not totally true. There's still ways to screw it up, but it kind of, it makes it so that you're more likely to succeed. So yeah, we were able to zip these out on our CNC machine, and just kind of one by one stack them up. Little dowels in between, a bit of glue, and I think a couple of nails just to hold it tight while the glue dries. But basically, you know, we kind of fussed over the design for a number of weeks, and then had to do all the construction in a handful of days, just because of the timeline we were under. But thankfully, because of all the planning we had done, that was possible. They went the extra mile. They wanted to smooth out the tops to make it a comfortable surface for people to sit on. It really, we wanted it to be kind of a tactile thing, you know, fluid, but just kind of chunky enough that you can tell that it's coming from this kind of layered assembly.
There were a lot of pieces. This took us like a few days to assemble. I do remember gluing and screwing for a while. Actually, it was mostly gluing because the dowels, but we did have to put in a couple of screws in a couple of locations.
Yeah, this is in the days leading up to the event, I think, because this was one of those all hands on deck nights where everybody's there working late, getting the stuff together. Let's see if we can see here. The next couple might show it fully assembled.
Yeah, there's
there are the benches. There's the frame in the background getting ready to go upright. Yep, there. Oh, I will talk just a little bit about this. you can see that piece of plywood that
Yeah.
she's sitting on.
Mhm.
That's another jig. That's us using the digifab to our advantage
Oh,
again.
okay.
And so that was drawn to basically correctly locate the legs in, three-dimensional space.
And are you using that when you were setting it up then too? Like you brought that out to the site? Okay, yeah.
Yes. And so that ensures that everything is kind of in the correct location, correct distance, and alignment to each other. And then that little post that's sticking out to the left, that one piece of plywood sticking to the left, that locates our hoist so that it's in the correct position to lift it up. So we have this just little pack of materials that goes with us, and it makes sure that every time everything is set up correctly. Let's see if we can scan it here. There's our hoist.
This
it makes
is
it
my
look like a
favorite
bit
part.
like a boat. But
Yeah.
you've got a cable backstay that basically clips right back to your ballast. You've already got this heavy object that you can anchor to. Let's anchor back to that. And then your winch basically hooks over the frame and just lifts it up into place. And it's, a one-person job, takes about a minute, and no one has to be underneath this heavy object. There was a brief point in time where we were thinking like, oh, maybe we can have people lift this. After we started doing the math, you'd get it off the ground, but by the time you started getting up in the air, you're
lifting
down
too
towards
close
the lever
to the
point.
fulcrum. Yeah.
And it gets really dicey. And so we're like, not even going to touch it. Let's come up with a safe way to do this without having to get a lift on site. And so this thing, we got to the point where we're setting this up in, I think, 4 hours. And that includes all the lighting and everything like that. Like from the van pulling up, doing that, and then we can break it down in about 2 hours. Because it's all just like pins and some bolts and a winch.
Did anyone ever try basically cabling the two top points together and then trying to winch that cable down?
There was some talk of that, but there are a couple issues with it.
You probably end up with forces hitting in the weird.
Because basically when you're horizontal, the force required is infinite.
Yeah.
You'd
start getting it going. Yeah, exactly. And then you're back to you're just lifting.
And the issue there is if one of them isn't secured, then you don't know. They're going to be a certain distance from each other, but they could do this in space, which is, again, dicey. So we wanted to lift one at a time and be anchoring to something that was a bit more static. So
well, and the nice thing is you also weren't underneath it. You could hoist it up. You're free from it. So if anything failed, you'd be safe.
Yep. Yeah, I was really proud of how this came together in a way that like it could be assembled by people who are semi-skilled in a couple of hours, fit in the back of a vehicle, and that we were able to kind of design our own tooling so that it was able to be set up without, we did.
Yeah, it made us a lot more comfortable.
Yeah. You'll notice we do have a giant ladder, and that's for basically installing the canopy. We had a pretty clever solution for that as well. The rope, there's a rope around the edge of the canopy that basically just loops over little hooks on the frame, so we don't have to rethread it. We basically just kind of clip it up on the top and walk along.
It's got some movement. Yeah.
Yep. And then there's a little winch assembly buried down in that hub that allows us to kind of crank the last couple of inches. Yeah, there you can see that's, I think, everything but the benches thrown in the back of a Sprinter.
Yeah, it's ironic that the benches end up being the largest thing because they're the most cohesive, the element that does not break apart.
Yep.
Here.
So this was the first installation of it, actually, before SDF. This was for Seattle Art Museum's Party in the Park, their annual fundraiser.
Yeah, it's
I think this was the second time we had worked with them on this fundraiser, and they trusted us, and we showed them what we wanted to bring, and we told them, like, this is a bit presumptuous, but we'd like to be next to the Calder because we think they'd play nicely together. And they're like, you can't get too close. I'm like, we'll give it a little space. But it was really special actually being able to set up next to that because it's such an iconic piece, and I think they really did complement each other. So
I'll have to, when we look at photos, so my other group, designers, is also there, and we did the same thing. They're like, where do you want to be? I said, well, it'd be real nice to be right under the Calder. So we're on the other side. And then here's at the park.
So this one, you can see a little bit of the LEDs in action. For that first festival, we didn't yet have the programming worked out, so we just had kind of rainbows. But for this one, there was this kind of soft wave, just white light kind of waving across, and it was so scenic. God, I wish I'd thrown this picture in there. I don't think it's in this presentation. I stopped out to see it at night. I wanted some nighttime shots, and I knew you guys were thoughtful enough to kind of put up some little kind of
Caution tape.
Yeah.
But I was really
Everybody's in
happy.
there.
I was actually really happy to see there was a group of about 8 people sitting down there at 2 a.m, just having a conversation in the pavilion, and I'm like, yes,
That's cool. Yeah,
this is
yeah.
fantastic. You know, people want to spend time here, so it was a delight to see. It was a really beautiful location for it.
We'll switch to these photos here. So there's with your rainbow.
Yep, that was party in the park. People hanging out.
There's party, same spot, just in the daytime, right when it's installed.
And this is a good shot for seeing actually just back one.
Yeah, seeing that joint right there. Yep.
Yes, and really trying to keep it tight. We had initially drawn like a little cap that would like show the frame itself, like coming to a point. We didn't quite get there, but it's pretty successful as is. So we've kind of left it as is there.
Yeah, it's got its own interesting tectonics there as it all collides. You know.
Let's see, and then
it's the park.
Oh, next to the glass house. Yep.
Yeah. Video might show an overall the shape here. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, this is kind of a good chance to kind of appreciate the scale of it too. It's I think even people that we had told how big it was, you don't quite understand until you're in its presence, which was a lot of fun. It was a super comfortable space to be in. You didn't feel kind of crowded at all. Yeah,
and given how it's going vertical too, that the bigger it was, the more you're getting a little bit more footprint, to be under in the shade there.
We got a lot of kind of comments from folks asking if it was a permanent installation, and that was something we were pretty proud of hearing, because it meant that they saw it as something that could be a permanent installation. And so that's kind of one of the goals that we're trying to keep in mind as we work forward is can we build something that has a life beyond the design festival, whether it's an installation in a public space or private owner, something like that. So that's something we'll be discussing as we plan for this year.
One of the other things that was nice about it was just the fact that it was a pavilion that provided shade. It was mid to late August, and it was sunny and hot out, and it was a nice place to just relax and gather.
Yeah, shade space is great. Sorry, I was running production this side. Yes. Yeah, I mean, this event, especially where we are in August now, is definitely, there's not a lot of large trees there. And so, yeah, shade is great. Building that part. There's another flyover here from relatively the same angle with a bunch of people inside, and a bird apparently flying around the outside that kid's chasing. You see the bird go 3 feet and then I thought they had one more lit up shot, but maybe. Oh, there's some with the lights on right towards the end of day there.
Yeah,
there's actually Chris. He was the one that designed that system. It looked like he was maybe tweaking it a bit,
getting it set. Yeah, another sense of scale there. Inside with Tyler and his brother. I don't know why it doesn't want to refresh here.
Came to visit.
There we go.
Oh wait, sorry, I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, here. Do these two look similar?
I realized you were in the vest.
We are related.
The glasses. That's awesome.
Yeah, very similar glasses. But I mean, yeah, to your point of scale, right? It's the largest thing other than the big pavilion out there. Yeah, so yeah, it was definitely a tall task to pull off here.
But I was really happy with how because of the way we had designed it, that setup was relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
Because that's.
Do you recall how long it took for the day of?
We're about 4 hours.
Okay.
From
Yeah, it was
like pulling the
pretty
vehicle up
darn quick
to
for-
the lights running. Yeah. So it's something to keep in mind, like, because how long is that window usually that you have to set up?
Well, you have 12 hours to set up. You have 2 hours to unload.
Yeah.
I think we
that's
needed
the
all of the
trick.
2 hours
Yeah,
to
yeah,
unload.
to get it all
I
out
mean,
of the thing.
it seemed like once we had it all there, it was pretty
Mhm.
quick, to put up, but it was moving it from the van to the site that took a while. There's a lot of
And
pieces.
I remember it being important not to start breaking down early. Like there's an obligation to kind of have it like in its assembled state until the end of the festival.
Yeah,
and then you gotta go.
There
you
was a
gotta-
rush.
Did you take it down that night on
We
Sunday
took it down
night,
that
or-
night, yeah.
Okay, yeah. There were a lot of folks who waited till Monday morning that year, but more boats. There's another shot. That's probably that's the glory shot of it there. I think that's the final.
Yeah.
One.
It
But
really,
yeah.
I think it fits well on the site too. I mean, we took inspiration from sailboats, and it's right there near all of
Frames the view really nice.
Mhm.
I keep getting spam things on Instagram of this photo saying, "Oh, it's a very lovely photo of the sea and the sky." Like it's something's triggering like an AI reading the image. You're like, "Oh yes, beautiful picture," and then like it says something about that.
That's great.
But so for you two, let's go back to this mode. What are things? Are there things you would do different with this particular installation? Knowing, having completed at this point, I guess you iterated a little bit during the process, but
I think the piece itself, I'm still really happy with. It was, if anything, kind of coordinating the work. We were lucky to have kind of enough dedicated people that we were able to pull it off. But I think we would have been happier with that process if we had gone into it with a schedule of at least a bare minimum of like, regular meetings, regular work sessions that we could add on to if necessary. But not having any regular work sessions scheduled made it quite a challenge.
Yeah, it like Hank said, it became a heavy lift for a select few, where the more hands, it would have been a little smoother of a process. But we did end up pulling it off, just a little painfully.
And
Since you did do everything in-house, do you think it would have been more beneficial or helpful to collaborate with different companies or people, or even if they weren't like interns or students?
I think the level of collaboration that we did was kind of just right. We knew what our in-house resources were, and we used those to our advantage. And when that wasn't sufficient, we sought the help of kind of experts. So structural engineering, we didn't want to try and wade our way through that on our own. The cutting of metal, that wasn't something we were well set up to do. So just hiring that out. Welding, that was critical for the safety of this one. Because there's a lot of force at that kind of bottom plate. That was something we outsourced. But aside from that, I think working with other people would have actually slowed us down, because other people have schedules and they're like, we'll fit you in, sometime. Whereas if when we're working ourselves, like, okay, if I need to get it done in the next week, I'll put in the overtime and we'll get there. So,
but I think it largely depends on the skill set, right? Of the people that you have, the tools that you have available, the space. I mean, we were kind of well poised to do this work. If you're, for other teams that don't have those resources, certainly teaming with somebody who does, it makes a lot of sense, right? But again, I think if you do have the resources, we do see a lot of benefit in doing it yourself, and
well, and you don't necessarily, doing it yourself and it's on a smaller scale means you don't necessarily need those resources. Like there's always a way to, play within your skill set and push a little bit, like push just beyond, and you're learning something a little bit new, but you're still within your comfort zone. I agree. I think you're learning more that way. But it does mean you have to be realistic about. So in your case, right, like there's a lot of support and folks and stuff, so it's easier to be bigger. And if folks could apply your same approach to theirs, I would imagine it still would work. Just maybe a different scale or kind of.
Well, I think we were set up next to, was it called Glass House, that had the
Yeah.
kind of neon?
Yeah.
Like, it's a very different scale.
Yeah, it's one person.
Yeah.
Or two people,
It was
actually.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I was just disappointed I couldn't touch it. I understand why I couldn't. But
well,
Yeah,
and then
but-
so like we just talked to MBBJ a couple weeks ago, and theirs was the reverse, where they had a lot of partners that they relied upon for install and stuff, and it's just a different approach, but yeah.
yeah,
I think there's many ways to do it.
yeah, you probably want to figure out that partner before you make the commitment. If you're gonna bring somebody, like a significant partner, in to use their space and their resources.
Yeah, and if you need a design to what you're capable of doing, or capable of partnering with people, right?
Mhm.
You can't be so ambitious that in the end you can't build what you designed.
You mentioned Afterlife. Is this still around? Does this go anywhere? Or?
We might have a buyer, but it's a little
or at least
early.
a new owner,
Yeah,
or at least
there
a
you
new
go.
owner. Yeah, there's some discussion happening there.
whether it's being bought
there's-
or
Somebody's interested. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did. So Hank showed images that we had at the Sam Night Live event,
Mhm.
of course at the festival. Then we also set it up for our annual office picnic.
Oh yeah.
But beyond that, yeah, it's in storage now. But we're always interested in more use out of it.
Yeah. Yep.
So you reskin it every year, and that can just be the install.
Well, that was honestly part of our early discussion, that like the frame is a pretty sturdy kind of infrastructure
Yeah.
to kind of play other ideas off of.
Mhm.
We've been pretty preoccupied with moving into our new shop space. I had been hoping that we might collaborate with a different artist to say, like, here's a framework. Do you have any thoughts about how we could build off of that?
Mhm.
So I think there is plenty of opportunity in it still.
For sure. Any other things we want to share before we go?
I don't know. I mean,
One
for
last look at
advice for other teams
For others,
that are,
yeah, sure,
that are
If
new.
you've got some additional advice.
Start early. If that call goes out, assemble your team. Start thinking and designing, because that deadline comes up quick, and you want to have enough time to build what you want. Really,
That's a good point. This year's theme is curiosity. If you're seeing this now, even though we're not necessarily sharing these far and wide yet, that's the theme.
Yep.
Get going. There are mixers coming up, and I think next week starting to help folks brainstorm. So there's things going on. But yeah, I agree. Yes, starting sooner may benefit you, especially with a bigger idea.
and everyone needs to read the acceptance packet. It's a lot of good information in there that people tend to not read.
I mean, LMN's been doing this. I think we mentioned this early on. Has been doing this since the early end. So they generally, I mean, you all, there's different folks every year, but there's some institutional sort of knowledge about what the event is and what to expect. Where I feel like rarely do we ever have an issue where it's, hey, I don't think they understand.
Yeah,
This
we've
is
done it
2
enough
days,
years.
or like the context of the event that kids and things climb on stuff. It's sometimes that's a surprise to folks. So, well, all right. Well, thank you, Hank. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Go to cdesignfest.org for more about. In fact, let me show that on the screen. More about the Seattle Design Festival. Call for proposals will be going out in April and will be due in June. So it's coming up. Mixers will be happening in a few weeks. Look at the website for that. I really do not know more info than that, but it's coming. Tickets are limited for those. And thanks again.
Awesome.
See you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.